Yaskin Corley. First of all, I would like to thank all the members who participated in this discussion tonight, and in particularly those members, which was everybody outside of the two ministers, who are in support of this legislation and sees the need for this legislation. I'd also like to thank those who express sympathy with myself and Deputy Pat the Cope Gallagher, and indeed the wider community, and particularly the families of the tragic victims in the road collision on Sunday. And I know there's no words that can express the hurt, the loss that has been expressed by those families and friends and the wider communities of Gweedore, the Rosses, and Cloughaneely, and the loss of Sean Harkin and Daniel Scott and John Harley and Micheál Royce Rorty, and it's a very difficult time that we're going through. That being said, Minister, just to come back to this legislation, this is the code of practice that you asked about back in 2012 when you tabled a parliamentary question to the Minister for Finance, Michael Noonan, at that time. And Michael Noonan, in a Dáil answer, said to you, notwithstanding its voluntary nature, I expect that best practice dictates that the code be applied by all institutions to all classes of residential property. Now, are you telling me that Michael Noonan was telling you that the bank should do something that was going to wreck the economy, that was going to push up interest rates, that was going to lead to mass evictions and repossessions and every other thing that you have thrown at this bill tonight? The reality is no. This is the same code of practice that has been in place in the central bank since 1991 and is still in place in the central bank. So what the central bank have done is they have a code of practice which they say to the banks that this is what you should do in the case of transferring a mortgage. And as we have repeated time and time again, the first line of that is that you should not sell a loan without the consent of the borrower. It's a very basic principle. It's never been rescinded. And it's only talked about being rescinded because I have started to question this issue and where the legal premises of the fact that it's voluntary, and the fact that I have met with the central bank and informed them that I'm bringing forward legislation to put it in the statutory code. And that's what this is. So all this legislation is doing what Minister Noonan told you back in 2012 that all the banks should be doing anyway, and that what the code of practice currently in place in the central bank is saying. There was questions raised in relation to the constitutionality, and Deputy McGrath raised a pertinent question as well. Could legislation like this impact on existing contractual law? I would say let's just look at the 1976 Family Home and Protection Act. At that point in time, a spouse, usually the man in the case, who was the sole registered interest in the home, were selling on property without the consent of their partner, of their spouse. And this House introduced legislation that changed that said no consent, no sale. You had to get the consent of your partner, your married partner, if you wanted to sell a loan or wanted to remortgage it or so on. So it is the same premise that is here. But there's a number of other things that have been thrown in relation to this bill, which simply doesn't stack up, and Deputy O'Keelan put it well when he talked about red herrings. The reality is the mask slipped when the government in your first introduction said that you are for the normalisation of the banking system. But to me, it's never normal when family homes and people who are meeting their arrangements have their loans sold on to the vultures without their consent. That's not the type of normal banking system that I want. It's not the normal banking system that people want out there. And you say it over and over again that we don't have, a monopoly on compassion for those that are in mortgage distress or find themselves at the peril of the vultures or the banks. But if that is the case, then stand up and show us. Because, Minister, you hold the shares in Permanent TSB. You hold the shares that allowed that bank to sell 6,139 mortgages which were meeting their arrangements to Glen Bay, a fund which is going to pay Permanent TSB for it, which will get the receipts from those individuals paying their mortgages, which is unregulated and will continue to be unregulated despite Deputy McGrath's legislation. A fund that could raise interest rates in the morning without any recourse. A fund that could change the rules without any recourse. So this legislation is about taking a side. This legislation is about doing what should have been done many, many years ago, because it is past Unfortunately, for so many people who find themselves in the grip of vultures, but for many others, we can ensure that we can protect them. And the simple thing about this here is vultures should never have long-term products. They only have short-term interests. And that is the problem. As has been said before by David Hall and others, and Deputy McGrath made the point, and I concur with them, if you want to lose possession of your home and the residual debt written off, then a vulture is the place for you. If you want to stay in your family home, then it is better that your better chances would be with a bank. So, Minister, you said, and there's many deputies in this House who've been waiting a hell of a long time to find out if government were going to issue a money message or not. Tonight, you were able to say that you are going to block this at committee stage, despite this Dáil democratically wanting this legislation on the statute books. And you're saying that you will block this. Well, I'll say that we will fight you at committee in relation to this here. And I'll finish with this, Ken Corley. It's a valid point, because I believe that the government has been abusing its position in relation to money messages. And if the committee, after legislative scrutiny, believes that this should go forward and you attempt to block it in money message, then maybe we need to deal with this in a legal forum, because this, in my view, is abuse of process. There is no charge on the people, there is no additional tax on the people, and your arguments are flimsy because you want to stand for the vultures, for the banks and against the people. And that's the problem, Minister, and you're on the wrong side of the argument on this one.